I am going to show you how to make homemade biscuits today. We went camping recently for Sukkot and I made them there and people liked them and wanted to know how I made them. So I'm going to show you today. I have made biscuits for 15 years and I finally have my recipe just like I want it. I actually took someone else's recipe and tweaked it just a little, and I won't mess with it anymore because it's exactly what I want. They're light, they're fluffy, and they taste good. So I'm going to give you the list of ingredients for I guess one recipe, and just know that I'm doubling this, so the quantities might look a little different than what I'm telling you. So you're going to start off with 2 cups of flour. You're going to start off with half a cup of Crisco. The original recipe called for butter. I do not like using butter in this. I like using the Crisco. It gives a better texture. I don't necessarily know that flavor is better, but the texture, they're definitely lighter and not quite as heavy. So 2 cups of flour, half a cup of Crisco, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And then you're going to have a cup of buttermilk or milk, whichever you prefer. So to go ahead and start this, I'm going to add my Crisco. Like I said, I'm doubling this recipe. So the secret really to making really good biscuits is, number one, a really good recipe. And the second tip is mixing the shortening into the dough, into the flour, and then working with the dough as little as possible to make your biscuits. So set this out of the way. And the best thing I found to make to really get the Crisco incorporated really good is one of these huge serving forks. That's what I use. If you've got a pastry dill, you can cut that in. I'm going to go ahead and add my sugar, my baking powder, and my salt. And usually I add this before I do the Crisco, but I was doing this and started talking, so we'll get it mixed in here. And I'm just going to cut the shortening in. And most recipes say until it looks like cornmeal. I've never worked it in that much because I do want the biscuits to be kind of light and airy, so I'm going to want some maybe pea-size, a little bit bigger chunks of Crisco. You see that? So this step right here can't really, I guess you could overwork this, but it's not really that big a deal. When I add the milk, that's when we're going to want to incorporate the milk very, very quickly, because that's when we start running the risk of overworking it. So I think that's good. So you can see there's some clumps in there. Some people want to do this with their hands. That's cool. I don't really like my hands to get that dirty yet. So we're going to go ahead and add the buttermilk. And you're going to want to use all 2 cups of the buttermilk. The original recipe called for 3/4 of a cup to a cup, and it just wasn't enough. I had too much flour residue left over in the bottom, so I'm just going to kind of work this in real quickly, and I'm going to scrape the bottom of the bowl as I go. The thing is you want to kind of get in there and get out, get in there and get out with each. Little stroke. And then a little trick I use is I have one of these little plastic bowl scrapers, and instead of actually kneading my biscuits, I will kind of use this while the dough is still in the bowl to kind of mash my dough together. So I'm going to kind of bring it in, mash it in, scrape down that side, mash it, scrape down that side, mash it, scrape down that side, mash it. So I'm not really going to knead it very much, and I really don't care how pretty the biscuits are. I just want them to taste good. So I'm going to go ahead and flour my countertop here. To cut the biscuits out, you can use, I know my mom uses a can. She just cut the lid off of both sides. I use the Pampered Chef liquid dry solid measuring cup. I just take the little plastic cup out and use this. It works really good. So then I just dump my dough out on the counter. And here I might kind of give it a good squish, but I'm not going to like knead it and work it, because I do not want this to be overworked. So while I'm kind of forming it on the counter, I'll kind of work it just a little bit, mash it. But basically I'm not going to work that Crisco down to mush in the flour. So you really probably can't see it on the video, but there's little chunks of Crisco still in there, and you want to keep those because those are going to create little air pockets. So then I'll just take this Pampered Chef deal here. I'll cut one biscuit out, and I kind of do it around like that. And I'll usually kind of knock a little bit of the flour off the bottom, and then just kind of shape it a little bit, and then I'll put it on my baking dish. And then, since there's a little residue of the dough on this little deal here, I'm going to run that around in the biscuits in case you've never made biscuits before. And then the next biscuit you cut, the dough sticks a little less to it each time you do that. So then I'll kind of shape them a little bit more if I want to. And I'll just go around and cut these out. Before I started, I turned my oven on 425. The original recipe that I tweaked called for it to be on 400, but I find that at 425 it puffs them up really quick, makes them a little more golden brown, makes the outside a little more crunchy, cooks them a little bit quicker. So you got to kind of find what works for you with your oven, but you can do it at 400 or 425. I just kind of like a little bit of crunchy outside and really soft tender on the inside, and I find that temperature really makes them puff up real quickly, getting that real airy center and kind of toasty outside. So I've got a large family, so I doubled this recipe. You could quadruple it or do whatever you want with it. Triple it. And I'll just take some of this excess dough here, and this will get worked a little. Doing this, but I'll just kind of form another biscuit with my hands. I'll fit that down in there real snug. And then I've got a little butter I heated here. I'll brush some butter on them. Again, you can do this recipe with butter instead of Crisco. I've done that. I think it would work better if you had clarified butter, which clarified butter is just butter that has had the water removed. So it's just pure butter. And that would probably work a little bit better. And so now that I've got these buttered, I'm going to let them sit for about 10 minutes and let that baking powder really kind of kick into action. And then I will stick them in the oven, and we'll be back in just a few minutes, and I will show you the finished product. Thanks. We're back now, and we just pulled the biscuits out of the oven, and this is basically what you want them to look like, kind of golden brown. This is a glass dish. It's going to continue to bake for a few minutes, so I went ahead and pulled them out just a few minutes early, and I'll see if I can lift one of these out to show you. Whoops. Airy and fluffy. A little bit of crunch on the bottom, a little bit of crunch on the top. And a little bit of butter and jam, and that's good enough to eat. So, that's how I make my biscuits. If you have any questions, just comment below and we'll see if we can't get a response to you. Thanks. Bye.